All right, so we are live. First of all, I want to thank everybody or welcome everybody to Techgardens semi-annual TrueNAS webinar, which will be focused on data security today. My name is Chris Bohr, and I will be your host for today's call. Before we dive in, I do want to cover a few housekeeping items. The webinar and a copy of the slides will be available in a few days on the Techgardens website. I'll email everybody that signed up a link once it becomes available. We do plan to hold some time at the end for Q&A. Just enter your question in Zoom's Q&A tool at any time during the presentation, and we'll try to work through as many of them as possible at the end of the call. Feel free to reach out to me directly also if you have any questions or would like to discuss anything that was presented here in more detail. And lastly, we do plan to send out a short survey next week on the webinar. So please take the time to respond as they do have an impact on future webinars. In fact, today's topic was selected based on the feedback we received on our last one back in August. And we're not advancing. There we go. All right. At Techgardens, I focus on core infrastructure and cybersecurity. We are a New York-based IT consultant and integrator that has really been in this business for over a decade and touched pretty much every aspect of enterprise IT. I personally have served in just about every conceivable role in technology, from hardware and software development, product management, business development, and now sales. As a consultant, building and maintaining customer relationships is paramount. And as such, the products I recommend and sell must fully meet clients' expectations 100% of the time. TrueNAS, iXsystems TrueNAS, has been a focus of mine for the last 3 years because their products work exactly as intended, and very rarely have we had a problem. iXsystems customer support is the best in class because they do care deeply about their customers. And I do mean that. When you look across all the vendors in the IT spectrum, and there is a range, and iXsystems definitely comes out on top in my mind when it comes to customer support. Also, their systems do perform, and this is an important point I want to make before we dig into this, because they put the time in upfront to ensure each storage array is designed and configured specifically to meet their customers' unique requirements. So, everything is, the work is put forth up front. Jason Rose, who will be presenting on behalf of iXsystems, and I work with Jason pretty much on a daily basis. I must say, he is maybe one of the best systems engineers I've worked with in my 35-year career. This webinar is unique in that we have invited Futurex to join us as a guest speaker for reasons I hope will become evident as we get through the presentation. I support Futurex as a vendor, just as Techgardens. Let me try this one more time. I support Futurex as a partner for the same reasons I actually support iXsystems. They've been in the cybersecurity business for a really long time. The products are rock solid, and if it was my network with my customer data, there's nobody else I would trust for protection. Tim Weston will be supporting us from Futurex, and he, like everybody else I've worked with at Futurex, is a cryptographic subject matter expert and frankly, just plain good guy to work with. So we've all known cybersecurity has been a major concern for both individuals and organizations for a long time. However, 2021 was the first year I personally felt it directly. It started with me getting a "Dear John, we've had a data breach and may have lost some of your data. Here's a free 1-year credit monitoring certificate. So sorry." Letter from not one, but 3 different entities in the same month. Not too long after that, one of my best friends, Fortune 100 company, got hit by a ransomware event that knocked them out of much of their IT and OT environment and forced him into emergency, truly 24/7 duty for almost a month to get everything restored, resulting in, as reported in their earnings statement, a total indirect cost of roughly $75 million. And lastly, the Colonial Pipeline ransomware event, which the pipeline literally passes about 600 yards from my house, caused me to have significant gas shortages for over 2 weeks. It has become very clear to me that something is changing and not for the better. Here are a few headlines I picked out from a couple of the cybersecurity feeds that I receive daily. The Accenture one on here, Accenture, one of the world's premier cybersecurity company, was a surprise and honestly taught me that if they can get caught up in a ransomware event, any company can. The Russian group headlines I thought are interesting because it's a reminder that state-sponsored threat actors are as technically competent as anyone in the business and better financed than all but just a few IT organizations. And as the last one shows, we know these attacks are here to stay. So what have we done about cybersecurity defense as an industry? The reality is we've been trying to stop breaches for over 40 years across 3, maybe 4 generations of technology, starting with various signature-based schemes, progressing to data endpoint protection, and now the focus seems to be on multiple detection and response strategies. With over 140 billion in spend last year and cybersecurity companies popping up truly every day, the effort is there, but what are the results? Well, frankly, if you look at it, it's not good. Ransomware is up almost 100%. Data breaches, the same. The 97 day to detection and 70 days to recovery statistic are probably the ones that are most alarming to me, and perhaps the most fixable of all the ones I reviewed in putting this together. But clearly, exponentially increasing attack cadence for more sophisticated, well-financed, and dedicated threat actors, while for the most part, dedicated threat actors, while for the most part, IT staffs are understaffed and underskilled, is the reality we face today. With one IT security survey reporting 30% of respondents experiencing a network breach within the last year, it looks to me like we are falling behind and perhaps not focused on the biggest problem. So sorry, Fortinet. I think we've all seen your ads, but right now, nobody stops breaches. Attacks are coming in with way too much velocity, skill, and they are evolving faster than defenses can keep up. This is not a comprehensive list of breaches in 2021, but it should illustrate that nobody is safe. Threat actors are going after organizations of every size, every type, though I must say it appears that finance, healthcare, and government entities are getting the increasing most attention. The reality is no matter where you are and who you are, you can be a victim at any moment. So the point I'm trying to make with these slides, and really the whole point of the webinar, is that more focus needs to be placed on minimizing damage after breaches occur, and most importantly, starting with data security. So with that said, I will turn the webinar over to Jason and Tim, and they can explain in more detail how this can be accomplished within TrueNAS, and more powerfully by extending key management using KMIP to harden key management platforms. Thank you all for attending and appreciate your attendance. Jason, why don't you take it from here?
Great, thanks, Chris, and thanks again to all of our attendees. Let me go ahead and get my screen share switched over, and we will dive in. So again, my name is Jason Rose. I'm one of the systems engineers here at iXsystems. Today, we're going to be talking about how TrueNAS can help improve data security within your IT infrastructure. So we're going to focus on 3 core areas that TrueNAS can help improve security in. One of those is data backups, one is access control, and then one is data encryption. And then within each of those, we're going to take a look at 2 key features where TrueNAS really introduces some kind of lower level security features to really improve your security posture moving forward. So why don't we go ahead and start with data backups. So data backups are going to be hugely important for recovering from a variety of different events, from data corruption to malware to simple stuff like accidental deletion of files by users. One of the core mechanisms that TrueNAS and ZFS introduces to enable easy data backups is through snapshotting. Snapshots provide an immutable restore point for both file systems and block volumes. So they could be file shares, they could be iSCSI LUNs mounted to VMware or Hyper-V or what have you not. The other important point here is the fact that those restore points are immutable, meaning that nobody can modify them, nobody can delete them, malware can't get in there and corrupt the backups. So you always have a restore point. The only thing that you can do with them, the root admin of the TrueNAS system can go in and purge the backups, but nobody else can modify any of the files. That's very important, not only from a compliance perspective, but also for combating the malware that we have floating around out there. Snapshots within ZFS are extremely space efficient. They are only going to be tracking the changes that are made to the data. So you can have gigantic volumes of data, and snapshots are not going to be a full backup of everything. It only needs to track the changes. So in the screenshot on the right, you can see that we are referencing close to 250 terabytes worth of data. But because we have not made a whole lot of changes to that data, the snapshot is using less than 1 megabyte on disk. So it's a very efficient way of preserving data without having to have a full entire copy of everything. Snapshots within TrueNAS can be scheduled for automatic creation and deletion. So we can set up retention schedules based on the recovery point objectives that you have within your organization. So we have flexible restore points, we have easy restore points, and the snapshots will automatically clean themselves up after a certain amount of time has elapsed. In addition to that, we can support upwards of 10,000 snapshots on our systems. So you can get extremely granular with the restore points. For example, you could have snapshots running every 5 minutes and preserve those for more than a month, and you would still be under this 10,000 or so snapshot limit. So it's a great way of preserving data, being able to minimize data loss in the event of a restore and have it be done all automatically. Now, dovetailing with snapshots is going to be the replication feature. Obviously, preserving the state of a file system on the host that hosts the file system is great, but having a second copy of it somewhere else is even better in case there's some sort of a natural disaster or a catastrophe within the data center or the entire system crashes. Ideally, we want to have a second copy at some other location, and ZFS replication allows us to do that. Essentially, it's going to provide a full copy of all current and historical snapshots on the second system. So it's not only the latest data set, it's also all of the historical restore points behind that latest data set as well. After the initial data is seeded, after you have the live data set copied, it's only going to need to send incremental updates, minimizing the amount of traffic on the network. So similar to how snapshots are only tracking the changes in the data, the replication feature is only going to be transmitting those changes. So if you are only changing a couple megabytes a day, that is all that you'll have to transmit over the wire to the replication target. Replication is fully encrypted in transit, so you don't have to worry about going over the WAN. Everything is going to be running through an SSH tunnel. It's highly secure. In addition to that, we can also replicate to an untrusted target location by encrypting the data set that the replication lands in. So this can be great for replicating to a co-location center where maybe you're concerned about somebody coming in and stealing drives or the physical system. You don't need to be concerned about that. TrueNAS can have that data land in a replicated state so that it is protected in the event of a potential compromise. Of course, we can replicate off-site, and we can even replicate to TrueNAS as a service host. such as our partner Subscriber Networks, that provides a plan where you can have a TrueNAS replication target hosted in their secure data center, and you replicate to it rather than having your own physical box in a colo or some other second site. It's a great, easy way of introducing an offsite backup target using ZFS replication without having a second ZFS system that you have to manage. So the next key area that we're going to dive into is access control. Obviously, this refers to who can access the data and who can access the interface that we use to manage the data. And there are a couple different methods that TrueNAS introduces to improve security in this area. The first is going to be two-factor authentication, commonly referred to as 2FA. So two-factor authentication is supported for the primary TrueNAS manager login, and it uses Google Authenticator. You can use applications like Authy or LastPass, any of the time-based one-time password providers, so that you can have a second factor for users when they log into the management console. This obviously helps protect against intrusion should the password for the TrueNAS be compromised in some way. So if somebody writes the password on a sticky note on their monitor, or if there is a keylogger installed, somebody with only the password that does not have that second factor will not be able to log into the TrueNAS system and potentially access all of your data. Unlike some other two-factor authentication solutions, because we are using a common time-based one-time password protocol, it does not require additional key generation infrastructure. You don't need physical tokens. You can use a simple application on users' smartphones to be able to generate that additional token. And setup is very simple. The system will generate a QR code that users scan in the app, and then that's pretty much it. Two-factor authentication is one of the most highly recommended methods to improve your security posture quickly. In fact, I found an article on the CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency's website, where they strongly advocate for setting up two-factor authentication. And if you're curious to read through that, I do have a link down there in the bottom. So it's a very easy method to improve your security posture quickly with minimal change to the overall management workflow. Next up in access control is going to be setting up role-based access control. And this is provided through our TrueCommand platform. TrueCommand is another management interface that targets managing and monitoring multiple TrueNAS systems throughout your infrastructure. And with TrueCommand, you can set up role-based authentication such that certain users might only have read-only access to certain systems or might not even see certain systems. So the idea is that we only want to hand out credentials to users that actually need full management of the system. Now, these credentials are going to be based on Active Directory or LDAP credentials, so you don't need to manage a second set of credentials. Everybody's using their same login. And it also eliminates the need to share the root TrueNAS password with your administrators. Everybody's logging in with their own credentials, and then they get forwarded to the TrueNAS interface pre-authenticated without having to know that TrueNAS root password. Whereas certain junior admins might get a read-only interface where they can just monitor for serious events on the system, and they can't potentially get in there and accidentally delete data or do something that they otherwise shouldn't do. This also enables per user auditing of any configuration changes within the TrueNAS. So if you have a certain user that maybe is disgruntled and went in and deleted a data set, you can track that activity back to that individual user by this method. Because we're tracking the individual users and what they are doing within the system, TrueCommand allows us to track all of those changes back to individual users with a date and time stamp. The next area that we're going to focus on is around data encryption. So data encryption is obviously very important for protecting confidential data, and TrueNAS offers data encryption at rest at the full file system level via a couple of different methods. Now, which method you deploy will depend on your requirements, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about that here. We do support both hardware and software-based data encryption methods. Software-based encryption is provided as a native OpenZFS feature. That's a feature that we introduced just about a year ago. It does incur a small performance penalty because the CPU of the TrueNAS system is performing the encryption calculations, but in certain workloads that can be managed, or we can configure the system around that expected CPU load such that it really provides a negligible impact to the overall experience of the system. It's very transparent. It allows for certain data sets, certain data containers or file systems to be encrypted and sit alongside unencrypted containers. So you're only incurring a performance penalty for data in and out of the encrypted data set. This is great for users that need to manage multiple use cases, of which maybe only one is sensitive and needs encryption at rest. Next up, we also offer hardware-based encryption using self-encrypting drives. Now, this is not going to cause any sort of performance penalty because the encryption is done at the hardware level on the drives themselves rather than in software. So it can be great for performance-sensitive applications. In addition to that, we also offer FIPS 140-2 Level 2 certification on self-encrypting drives for customers deploying into government infrastructure. Now, the last area that we're going to cover is going to be encryption key management. By default, if you're not using an external key management server, all of the encryption keys for both software and hardware-based encryption will be stored on the TrueNAS itself, which is fine for most users and most applications. But the issue is if the entire system is compromised, for example, the system is stolen or it is stored in a co-location and somebody accesses it, they will have access to those keys in addition to the encrypted data, so they can potentially get access to that. The way to mitigate this is using the Key Management Interoperability Protocol, or KMIP for short, which allows the encryption keys to be stored on an external key management device, and then those keys are only brought in for encryption and decryption as needed, and they are never stored permanently on the TrueNAS itself. This can be another layer of protection if you're concerned about the entire system being compromised or something along those lines. And again, this can be used, the KMIP service can be used with both software and hardware-based encryption at rest on the TrueNAS. So it's not exclusive to one or the other. It's going to work pretty much the same exact way, regardless of the encryption type that you're offering. So to review, the kind of three core areas that we talked about are going to be data backups, access control, and data encryption. Within data backups, we start with ZFS snapshots. It's a great way to combat simple ransomware, accidental file deletion, other types of data corruption where we need to roll back the state of the entire file system, or perhaps just go into a snapshot and retrieve individual files easily. The next area within data backups is going to be replication, and that's going to help recover from catastrophic failures where the entire system went down or a building went offline and we need a full second copy of that data at another site from which to restore. Next up, we have access control, and within access control, we're supporting two-factor authentication, or 2FA, and this prevents unauthorized access in the event of a password being compromised. So even though a user has the password via whatever method they use to obtain it, they cannot necessarily get into the system to access it unless they also have that second factor, that key generation. Next up, we have role-based access control, which limits full access to the TrueNAS systems to those users that actually truly need it. So we're limiting the attack surface in that manner such that we don't potentially have junior admins doing stuff accidentally or even maliciously. And finally, we have data encryption. Data encryption at rest is supported again through both hardware and software implementations, and it prevents data leaks through compromised drives and is required in many industries, of course. And finally, we have external encryption key management, where we are preventing data leaks through a fully compromised system by taking all of those encryption keys and moving them off of the TrueNAS device and onto a more specialized device to manage those keys. So with that, we are going to pass it over to Tim Weston, who's going to talk a little bit more about those key management servers through his company, Futurex. So Tim, why don't I hand it over to you?
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate that very thorough and in-depth discussion of the solution, and it really sets the stage for how Futurex complements that with our external key management solutions. Before I dive into the slide, I say I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the group and participate on the panel. Futurex has been in business for more than 40 years now, and being a hardware security module manufacturer ourselves, as well as cryptographic compliance and software solutions that complement that, it's a great fit for us to be able to combine our solutions with the iXsystems solution and integration with Techgardens to provide this type of security, the next level of security, if you will. And it really ties into this KMIP really is sort of the building block that connects things and makes it interoperable in an easy fashion. I always like to say some things are levels of easy are different for different folks, but this really is a big benefit. And having this standard, this KMIP standard, I wanted to touch base on that a little bit because providing that common interface and simplifies things compared to legacy approaches with a lot of different protocols or interfaces to deal with different vendors. It makes it easier for us to combine the solution in a more expedient way and simplifies it for end customers deploying it. Being managed by Oasis Open, this is the group that manages the PKCS 11 standards as well. The technical committee works there diligently to have comprehensive protocols between different encryption systems, newer and legacy systems and the like. It's a big benefit for being able to tie that together. And in the case of with Futurex tying in here, it interfaces with our external key management servers. And one of them I'll reference is our KMIS Series 3, we call it. It's a key management enterprise server. It's a hardware security module-based appliance with applications on top of it to manage the key management activities and the overall system, but also through something we call a VirtueCrypt, which is our software as a service with encryption services in the cloud. And I'll touch base a little more on those towards the end of the presentation. But the KMIP is really just it's important to focus that it's really part of the enabling factor that allows us to do one-to-many approach for integrations with different applications, different solutions. And there's a real benefit for us to bring this combination to market quickly and provide these benefits to the end customers. If I advance slide, forgive me here, next slide. So with the TrueNAS system and working with the KMIP solution, you can see here in this chart kind of showing the combination of where the expertise and the focus really of the TrueNAS system is on those self-encrypting drives, managing the secure data sets, a lot of detail that Jason eloquently provided in the preceding section. I think you have a good handle on that at this stage. Leveraging the KMIP protocols, it's built and set up for programmatic control of these. So you can manage thousands of keys, as we see with large enterprises. They have significant storage needs. There's data sets are huge. They have thousands of keys. Hundreds or thousands of users and applications. The system and the interfaces really benefit large-scale enterprise operations through this approach. And as you interface with the Futurex side of it, the KMIS Series 3, as you see here, it's really around the key lifecycle management. The KMIS supports full symmetric and asymmetric key certificate lifecycle managements from creation, rotation, management end of lifecycle of different keys after rotation. It has other capabilities that expand as a key server or certificate authority or even tokenization solutions. It's sort of our core platform that has a lot of different licensing aspects to meet different needs, but it really ties in the aspect of providing a hardware-based encryption solution, being FIPS 142 level 3, to be able to provide that, and this separation really between the solutions and the TrueNAS equipment, and then the external key management, as Jason describes, it really provides some of that separation and additional aversion to risk if there's a large-scale system compromise that you don't get the keys, and those are kept on a distinctly separate system to be able to put that together. From the standpoint of meeting different compliance mandates, of course, the hardware-based encryption is the foundation and the most prominent one. But there are additional solutions, and depending on the kind of data you're storing in these data sets, there could be other compliance mandates or requirements that come into play as well. Common ones for financial services, things like the payment card industry, PCI standards, PCI DSS or PCI P2PE. There's level 2 and level 3 requirements to be able to put together solutions that meet the banking and financial services standards above and beyond general encryption technology to tie into play. So, there's something to think about as well. You may have additional security standards beyond FIPS that come into play for the kind of data that you're storing. And that's on a global basis. Other financial standards come into play with things like the ANSI X9F standards for compliance for PIN-based security, PIN-based transaction security, and the like. Those EMV transactions, those kinds of things can all play at a global level. And then from there, you look at regional requirements, the GDPR type things. You're dealing with local requirements here and abroad, days of residency, issues in different countries around the world. There's a number of mandates that tie into play, that looking at how you architect and deploy key management solutions can come into play as far as meeting those local and regional standards as well. And as you look at the industry here, and finally, is on this slide, the final one is really dealing with healthcare industry, HIPAA standards, PII, or the information. Dealing with government standards. There's a number that come into play. So starting with a hardware-based encryption and key management solutions to complement the TrueNAS system here really helps leverage you to be able to be in a position to meet additional standards that may come into play. One of the things we do at Futurex is work with folks both in our on-premises deployments as well as cloud-hosted solutions to initially consult and work with our highly experienced and capable solution architect teams who really look at what factors come into play with your deployment requirements. What's the environment you're installing it in? Does it make sense to go into a particular implementation, whether you have high availability or redundancy needs, et cetera. Those can all come into play and are worked on at the outfront of an engagement to make sure that together we can consult with you and design a solution that meets your needs for today and tomorrow. As we all know, any of us been around a number of years with industry standards, compliance mandates. They're ever evolving and they keep changing for the future. So it's never a one and done type of thing to meet the security standards. It's a recurring audit compliance on a regular basis as those come into play, I like to say. And then finally, from the integration and deployment models, being a hardware manufacturer and providing these appliances like the Camus Series 3, we can take an approach, if it makes the most sense, to deploy a solution, whether it's an on-premises configuration. Those can be set up for, like I said, high availability or redundancy or disaster recovery type environments, where those are managed in a data center, a customer's data center, or a co-location type of data center where you need to control and manage the device itself. You purchase those devices and do maintenance and support on those, but you're in full control of the servers. The interfaces have, web-based interfaces for GUI control and administrative control, very robust when it comes to role-based permissions and access control and the like, of course, meeting dual control and separation of duty type requirements as well. That's one of the foundational pieces is making sure all of those control accesses are managed in such a way that you don't have a rogue employee or an external attack or somebody being able to single-handedly change things. It's the dual control aspects are important to ensure the role-based permissions are managed, and that folks on the teams there even have access to just the functions that they're should be limited to in scope, rather than full root access to systems that could be vulnerable by having them with those unnecessary access controls. And then the second implementation, we started the VirtuCrypt Cloud. And this is a offering we've been in place for a little over 5 years now, as we looked at building solutions and helping clients deploy solutions without the capital expense of putting out on-prem hardware solutions. As we've taken the same Futurex hardware we deploy in on-prem solutions and set that up in a number of data servers around the world. I think we're up to close to 13 or so now, in different regions, operating our own hardware in those type of environments, and then providing software as a service, or encryption as a service, I like to call it, in a software-based subscription model where you can access those, and the Futurex and VirtuCrypt team manages that hardware, everything from compliance aspects to audits to managing client interactions with it and support teams that go with it, as well as maintaining all of the product lifecycle upgrades. As over time, different versions of hardware products come out through their natural hardware lifecycle, the VirtuCrypt team is managing that and keeping you on the latest version of the hardware to be able to offer this service as a turnkey in the cloud. And that's a real benefit for customers, and particularly as we're doing a lot of work with different public cloud providers, and folks are looking at applications they want to move to cloud hosted offerings. These last 4 or 5 years has been a real move for a lot of folks into cloud space. So we have a great implementation option for folks if the cloud-based solution meets your requirements better than a hardware appliance would. And then finally, there's a combination potential as folks look at managing appliances in maybe multiple data centers. These key management servers, for example, you can run those in an on-prem environment, maybe for your primary operations, and use a hybrid cloud as the DR for your disaster recovery type location. We can work in combinations that make sense for folks based on their operational demands and transaction throughputs and that kind of stuff, to build an architecture that can be flexible and meet those needs, whether that be fully on-prem, fully cloud, or a combination thereof the two. So there's a lot of flexibility in putting that together, and of course combining that with the systems as Chris and Jason have laid out. I think we've and provide that additional layer of separation of keys being managed from external source that will provide great benefits to the end solution. So with that, Chris, I think I'll hand that back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tim, and Jason as well. So one point I definitely want to build on before we finish up today is that when you look at the breaches accomplished by some of the more advanced attacks, such as, let's say the Solaris Sunburst breach, you'll find that the very first thing that threat actors look to do is advance their permissions, escalate their privileges and their permissions. And if they're able to do that successfully, then they actually can get access to even encrypted stored data, if not locked down properly. And that really is, when you put a hardened key management platform together, talking via KeyMIP with your storage device, that is the way to prevent losing data under a worst case scenario. And that really is, I think, the point of the KeyMIP features and the integration that Futurex and Techgardens, Futurex and iXsystems did to really maximize the level of protection for their joint customers. So with that, this was going to be the last piece, which is Q&A. For those that might have joined late, we were going to use the Zoom Q&A tool to take questions. None have actually come up so far. So frankly, you got another minute or two or a second or two to put something in. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up. I will be reaching out to everybody directly over the next couple of days. I'll send you links to the presentation. You'll have my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions on any aspect of that. So with that, Tim and Jason and the rest of the team supporting you, thank you very much for supporting me here. And to the attendees that have joined us, thank you as well. So with that, Kristen, I think we can call this a close.